Hi crafty friends, Shana from ShanoukiArt. In today's Big Fat Pink journal, we're going to be creating a corner pocket with some junky junk. I'm also going to show you how to extend the design onto the opposite page so the pages are cohesive. You can create a corner pocket using anything. For today's one, I'm going to use some bits and pieces I've been collecting that I like to call junky junk. If you're using a digital kit, you can of course use that. You can use bits from a magazine, scrapbook paper, whatever you have. Of course, I'm not going to use everything. I always like to have more than what is needed, so I have variety and choice. I'm going to use this piece of brown paper as the main part of my pocket. Because it's quite plain, I want a background that has some sort of design or some interest. I will page through my journal and just find something that is suitable. I will put the brown paper against it and just see what looks good and pleasing to the eye. This always, of course, is personal preference. I've decided to go with this page on the left. I love that effect of the paint peeling that it has. There are some pink flowers and it has a vintage feel, so the brown paper suits it really well. You can cut your corner pocket first, but I'm going to stick it first and then I'm going to cut. I'm going to apply some craft glue on the left and bottom of my page, and then I'm going to apply the piece of brown paper over the top. You will notice I have not cut the brown paper straight on the inside part. Because it's meant to be like a scrap or just junk, I like to leave a bit of a rough feel. Just a note on my process here. Because I'm using this thin brown paper, I applied the glue first and then placed it over the top, and then I'm going to cut it down to size because the paper is quite thin. If I was using, for example, a scrapbook paper, I would have first cut the triangle that was going to fit as my corner pocket and then glued it. If though I was using a vellum, I would have done the same way as I've done this brown paper by gluing first and then cutting. I feel it just helps with positioning and cutting at the correct size. You will notice also that I just used a ruler to tear off the excess. I like that rough, rustic feel. You can of course use a scissors or a cutter to make yours a bit neater. I want to add a little bit of decoration or embellishment to my pocket so it's not quite so flat. So I'm just going through the bits that I have and tearing off small pieces, and I'm sort of going to pile them up in a sort of an embellishment cluster. I don't really pre-plan these clusters. I just go through all the bits that I have and add them sort of in a staggered way. I add some, I remove some. I just keep moving them around until I find the pieces look good together. I always try to use coordinating colors and things for contrast to create balance. I've used the white paper with the black text, which is from a magazine, for contrast. This piece of turquoise corresponds with some turquoise bits in the digital print behind my pocket, and I'm sticking these down with some double-sided tape. I'm roughing up the edges a bit just to create a bit more vintage and used feel. I'm using double-sided tape for this as I'm sticking light paper onto paper, and because the brown paper is quite thin, if I'd used a craft glue here too, it may seep through and actually stick the pocket to the background paper. I'm going to add some of this homemade vintage tape. I do have a video tutorial on how I created this, and I will link that in the description box below. I love adding this to vintage pieces. I think it really creates a good effect. I want to add a bit more color onto this corner pocket to bring some of the dark pinks from the digital print that I'm using in the background. I'm just covering up all the areas I don't want to have any splatter on. And then I'm using a magenta colored acrylic paint. I'm watering that down and using my fan paintbrush and just adding a few small sprays or sprinkles of paint on the corner pocket. And you can see how that picks up the color from the dark pink in the flowers. I'm going to use some vintage photo distress ink to distress the edge of the corner pocket. I should perhaps have done this first, but that's okay, we can do it now. I'm just placing a piece of scrap paper underneath and then using my blending brush to darken the edge of the pocket. Although it's a subtle change, you can see a big difference, and it helps the pocket stand out. You can always keep adding to your pocket embellishment if you find another interesting piece. You can put as little or as much as you want. I'm also curling up the corners a little bit more of the white page and using a little bit of distress ink on the curled up edges. I want it to look like it's actually peeling off the page. Another small piece of the vintage tape, and now I'm going to look at what's going to go inside my pockets. I love filling these up, and I tend to put quite a few pieces in. For this, I believe more is more. If there's a piece you want to use but you don't like the way it looks, you can always change it. I have this clothing tag. I think it's a perfect size and it's a nice hard cardstock, but it's a little bit plain. So let's fix that and make it suit the theme. I'm going to start by adding some of that white with black print magazine paper, the same that I used on the embellishment on my pockets. I'm just going to cover up the store name. This also helps it to correspond with the pocket so everything is matching. I'm then going to use a piece of tissue paper on the back. This has just got a print of sheet music. And for this, glue stick is sufficient. Just going to trim off the excess. Distressing the edges. And I'm going to add some color. I'm going to use that same magenta color I used for my splatter. I'm just going to add a little bit on with my finger. No rhyme or reason. I'm just smooshing it on there. Once that's dry, I'm going to add some texture with some texture paste and a stencil. This stencil is available from Stamperia. The link will be in the description box below. I'm using a palette knife to press the texture paste over the stencil. I'm not going over the entire tag, just a little bit here and there. And then I'm going to dry that really well. I think that looks very pretty. And then pop that into the pocket. And then the same as my little decoration, I don't know exactly what's going to go into my pocket. I'm going to try lots of different things. I'm going to move them around and then just see what works best. It's hard to know how it will look until you actually put the pieces in. I found this beautiful rose in the magazine while I was paging through actually for something else. I'm going to fussy cut this and apply it onto the right hand side page. I think the color goes beautiful, the roses match the theme, and this will help connect the two pages. Before I stick it down though, I want to add another element to help connect. I'm going to do some of the magenta splatter on the right hand side as well. Just a little bit, but this will make it cohesive. Going to stick the magazine rose down just using a glue stick. You don't need much more. And then I want to add a little bit more of the vintage tape. I love adding it in the middle as if it's keeping the pages together. I'm going to add a couple of pieces down the center. I feel it needs something more just behind everything. I want something again in a vintage color. I'm going to use this piece of vintage music paper. It has some foxing and some old tape. I think it's perfect. So I'm going to just fold that into 3 just to get it a nice long shape and place it behind all my other elements. At this point, I thought I was done, but then when I looked at it some more, I felt it needed a little bit more contrasting something in the bottom left-hand corner. So I decided to add some white splatter. I'm just going to cover up all the bits that I don't want to get covered, and then I'm going to use my watered-down white acrylic paint, my fan paintbrush, and I'm going to add a little bit of splatter just in that corner. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this episode. I really hope you were inspired to create your own corner pockets, tags, and elements to make your pages cohesive. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell so you're notified every time I upload new content. Thanks again for watching, happy creating, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!